Like this circuit, all in one, it should be okay. But it's true that this shoulder problem is not a benefit. This is obvious.
It's clearly 9 months on, still causing him some concern though. I heard some talk that maybe after this weekend he'll go for some further checks in Italy. Is a possibility that he has to go under the knife for yet another operation? What's the plan after this weekend to try and get him back at 100%?
Really clear is going to Italy to have a check, and eventually if needed just a quick surgery to fix the issue. We don't really know more, but it should be anyway something very small, and we have to take the opportunity not having Qatar and these 3 weeks without racing to do something to be 100% clear for the rest of the season.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for the update, Nico. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks as always to Tech 3, KTM boss Nico Goyon. Yeah, let's hope that Manfred Vinales, when he does go back to Italy for those cautionary checks, he's going to be fighting fit when we head to Europe in Jerez. This is a great sight, isn't it? Marc Marquez back on his spare factory Ducati. He is going to be involved then in the final 10 minutes of this session. Ralph Fernandez, well, what did we say at the start of this session? Was Brazil a blip? Well, I think we've had our answer already. A 2:02.409 has seen Fernandez become the fastest rider around Kota this morning. Good lap that, actually. He's gone over almost a 10.5 clear of Pecco Bagnaia in second place.
Yeah, that was his first time lap out of the pit, so we'll have to see shortly whether Ralph Fernandez puts some fresh rubber in for that lap to lift himself up to the top. But however he's done it, he is now quickest, so we've got Aprilia's 1st, 5th, 6th and 7th. Ducati's 2nd and 4th, and a KTM between them all in 3rd. None of those include this man, Marc Marquez, who's now through the left-hander of 7. He'll now go right through 8 and the left of 9 before he returns to the turn 10, which brought an early end to his session around about 25 minutes ago.
Yeah, that was the plan a few moments ago, wasn't it, for Marc Marquez? This time around, at considerably less rate of knots, he's able to get himself through turn 10. Not just where his body's at, where is his head after a big get-off like that to start the weekend, where I think we all felt that we were going to, for the first time this season, Lewis, probably really see Marc cut loose and really see Marc back to his brilliant best, but that would have rung his bell, to say the least, that crash at turn 10.
Yeah, he adores the circuit of the Americas, but I guess he might not feel as if this circuit loves him back right now, given the crashes from Leeds that we've discussed earlier on, including his last 2 visits to Austin.
Yeah, and for just the second time in his short Ducati career, Marc has been off the podium in 3 successive Grand Prix. No problems for one Ducati GP26. A great weekend in Goiânia last time out. Pole position, sprint and Grand Prix podiums. And as mentioned, he really does have a liking for this Kota circuit. Fabio Di Gianantonio, he's the first rider to find a 2:01 lap this morning, a 2:01.909 from Diggia. He must be on fresh rubber because he's jumped 3/10 clear of Fernandez in second place.
Yeah, and Ralph Fernandez is on fresh rubber too. Brand new medium front, brand new medium rear tyres. Here's Ayagura circulating on what our timing screens are certainly indicating are worn tyres, or tyres that he's certainly been running since the start of the session. And he's also putting in some strong sector times on board his factory Aprilia. Marc Marquez, of course, on new tyres, because he won't be seeing those tyres that he crashed on again. So he resumes his session with 8 minutes to go. So Marc Marquez is going to do well to get 4 more laps in.
Yeah, just a quick note on Di Gianantonio, if you joined us, which I'm sure you did in Goiânia last weekend. Fabio had a pretty big get-off in the morning warm-up session. He said he was sort of underestimated just how much he whacked the left shoulder, which caused him so much problems throughout the latter stage of 2024. He said he was in a lot of discomfort, a lot of pain for periods of that Brazilian Grand Prix. He was really stiff, didn't have a lot of mobility with the left arm on Monday as he jetted off to New York for the special VR46 livery. No excuses, he said, though. Can't use that as an excuse around this Kota circuit, but it will be interesting to see how that shoulder holds up around what are going to be 20 long laps here on Sunday. Martin then up into second. He's the second rider into the 201s.
Confirmation at the bottom of your screens, as you can see, Di Giannantonio is on fresh rubber, like Ralph Fernandez. Brand new medium front, medium rear combo for the 49, who's now got around 27 thousandths in his pocket over Jorge Martin, who just took second place. But Di Giannantonio looking to further extend his advantage out of the final corner, turn 20, and he's now down to a 2:01.8. He's a 10th clear of the 2024 champion.
Yeah, he was third in the Grand Prix here last year, despite being laid low by that nasty bout of illness. That was his first podium since his victory in the Qatar Grand Prix of 2023. Podiums in Moto 3, and he will never forget that second place here he had in Moto 2 in 2021 when he rolled out the T-shirt. The speed is back, Digia is back. Classic. Well, he's back at the top of the timesheets here in Austin this morning. We're keeping a very close eye, monitoring the progress late on of Marc Marquez. This is just going to be lap number 6 of FP1 to be completed by the factory Ducati rider. And this is going to be a very, very cautious approach, isn't it, as far as Marquez is concerned? Not sure what's happened to Alex Rins this morning, but he's a bit off colour to say the least. I mean, Alex, we haven't seen him have any sort of technical dramas. We've certainly not seen him on the floor. 2:03.959 though has got Rins cut adrift at the back of this pack. He's almost 3/10 behind Marc as it stands right now in the factory Yamaha.
Yeah, the Yamahas once again in the bottom third of the field. Their fastest rider at the moment, unsurprisingly, is Fabio Quartararo, but he is in 16th place and a second and a half currently off the pace of Fabio Di Giannantonio.
Yeah, just looking at the top speed figures, we've got Quartararo, Miller and Razgatlioglu. In fact, all 4 Yamahas are in the bottom 5 in terms of top speeds. Razgatlioglu is on the slowest bike out there in terms of top speed, 329.6 kilometers an hour, which compared to Bastianini's rocket ship KTM RC16 is giving up the almost 13 kilometers an hour down that long back straight. Razgatlioglu at the moment is down in 19th place. Once again, he's got the measure of his vastly more experienced teammate Jack Miller, a former podium finisher here, of course, himself, Miller, in Austin.
Yeah, Toprak only a couple of tenths away, in fact less than that. He's a tenth away from Quartararo, the leading Yamaha at the moment in this session, so he's might be down in 19th place, but a good morning so far this for Toprak. His fellow rookie Diogo Moreira is on a near identical time to him at the moment. Moreira in P18, he's also a second and a half adrift as Marco Rigamonti watches closely. His world champion now rounding a corner which he lit up the rear tyre in last year's sprint and almost fired himself to the moon. Marc Marquez can scarcely afford a repeat of that mistake now.
Yeah, he's going to be in the 2:02s for the first time on this lap. It looks like he's in Mark. He might be closer, maybe a low 2:03, depending on how he attacks this final corner. All safely through, no dramas. Short run to the finish line where he's seen the checker flag first on so many occasions. Marco Bezzecchi joking in the press conference yesterday, saying that, well, Mark's won almost as many races here in Austin than what I've won in my entire MotoGP career. He wasn't far wrong, actually. Mark's, what, 7 times winner here? Bez an 8 times now MotoGP winner. Did he make it into the 2:02s? Of course he did. A 2:02.656, and he is very battered, he is very bruised, but as always he's defiant in the face of adversity. The number 93, that's climbing him up into P11.
This is where MotoGP riders really do separate themselves from just mere mortals like us in the commentary box, because surely so much in your mind would be telling you now to just leave it a little bit more margin, to take a backward step, but Marc Marquez does not know the meaning of a backward step. Acosta out on fresh rubber, as you can see on the screen, soft front, medium rear tyre combo at the moment for Acosta, and he's looking to make it count as well. There he is on the 37 bike. He'll be a little bit aggrieved at his stay at the top of the MotoGP World Championship, and was for no more than just 3 weeks, the gap between Thailand and Brazil. There is Acosta there now as we come through this tyre punishing the 3 right-handers, 16, 17 and 18. That's where you generate some of the highest tyre temperature of the season. Probably the last corner, I'd imagine, coming through Phillip Island on the left-hand side is where the only other time of the campaign where, certainly in terms of temperature on the side of the tyres, where it gets so high. High Acosta could be as high as P1 here. Surely he's going into P1. He does indeed, a 2:01.715. So in the Red Bull Grand Prix of the United States, we have a Red Bull KTM factory racing rider in P1. And Marc Marquez well on target to get himself up into the top 6 here. He should be on the fringes of the 201s with this, maybe a low 202 as he now approaches the final corner, turn 20. So building confidence, building speed is the reigning world champion, and beginning to build some blocks back up the order, up into 4th place, a 202.0. What crisis, says Marc Marquez.
Pretty amazing. You just have to doff your cap and admire the work this and Marc Marquez. Of course, he's done it so many times. There's been big crashes in his career. Picks himself up, dusts himself down, and comes out and just shows the top-notch talent that he is. 4th place, a 202.093. So Marc almost the 4th rider in the 201s this morning. There's only Acosta, De Gianantonio, and Martin that are ahead of him at the moment. This will just be easing a bit of tension inside that factory Ducatis, just soothing a few nerves after the butterflies in the stomach when Marc crashed right here, going down through turn 10, right at the start of this session. The crash which did momentarily bring out the red flags, but sometimes when you see the 93 with his back against the wall, that's when he really does come out fighting and swinging. 4th place after a 192km/h crash at turn 10 would be a heck of an effort, Lewis.
Yeah, and he does like a challenge, does Marc Marquez. Make no mistake, this weekend and this year, Marc Marquez has a challenge, not just from the Aprilias, but clearly from his own current situation and the Ducati that hasn't exactly started this season in the vein of form that we expected. Pecco Bagnaia, who of course remember was leading the session a little bit earlier on in proceedings, he's now been dropped back down to 11th place, and with 20 seconds or so remaining in the session, he will get one more lap at this as the time now ticks away. He puts in his best lap of the session, a 202.511, and of course Pecco Bagnaia is not the kind of rider to get sucked into any kind of posturing and new tyres late in sessions. This will be Bagnaia on the same set of tyres he started FP1 with.
Yeah, was the real Pecco Bagnaia going to stand up for the first time really in that 2026? We have seen precious little so far this year, haven't we? Alex Marquez as a front-running force on the Ducati GP26 Gresini machine. Alex, of course, seemingly forever in P2 for most of 2025. 8th at the moment, coming into this 3rd round of the season. Just the 13 points collected by Alex. Of course, there was no points for him on offer in our season opener in Buriram. A bit more like it, a bit closer to the front he was in Goiânia, a 7th in the sprint, and a season best so far, 6th in the Grand Prix. But given how he laid his stall out early on in the early part of last season, where he was just reeling off podiums for fun, he was the world champion leader, wasn't he? After the Spanish Grand Prix in Jerez, I think it's fair to say that transition over to the new GP26 has just thrown Alex a little bit of a curveball.
Yeah, it's fair to say he's not maximising qualifying sessions at the moment. 2 qualifying sessions gone for Alex Marquez, and we get to see him start on the front 2 rows of the grid, and that is so much of the hard work done in MotoGP nowadays. If you qualify well, it just sets you up for the sprint over 10 laps tomorrow here in Austin, and the 20-lap Grand Prix to come on Sunday. Checkered flag is now out, all bar a couple of riders have taken it, and it will be Pedro Acosta that ends this quite dramatic Friday morning in Austin as your fastest rider so far.
Acosta fastest, Fabio De Gianantonio, well, he'll be riding the crest of the wave, looking to build on the momentum gain from Brazil last time round. Off a very rare pole position for Digia, his first in almost 4 years after Mugello 2022. Jorge Martin, keep an eye out for the Spanish rider, because he is finding that new Aprilia very much to his liking. The last of our 3 riders that did find a lap in the 201s, and then Marc Marquez. Well, what more can you say about the reigning world champion? On the floor, getting medical checks after a monumental spill, 190km/h crash going through turn 10. As he so often does, you just can't keep a good rider down for too long, can you? Marc rebounding to 4th place. Raul Fernandez recovering from what was a distinctly underwhelming Brazilian Grand Prix is 5th. Alex Marquez rounds out your top 6. Luca Marini, well, he's going to be top Honda runner, a 202.3 from Marini. Put him 7th, ahead of Ayagura. World Championship leader Marco Bezzecchi, who had his worst ever Friday in Brazil in his MotoGP career. Last time out, finds himself in the top 10, I think steady away from Bez. Thank you with Ellie in the top 10 as we pick up Jorge Martin. Practice start for the Spanish rider. 201.936 as Marc Marquez then begins the immediate impressions, just feeding back, just I'm sure physically and technically how he feels after that short second run.
Still looked like he was describing a little bit of instability there, wasn't he, on board that Ducati, which is not what you need when you've just thrown yourself down the road at the best part of 200 kilometres an hour.
Tricky uphill braking zone this first corner. We're going to take a look at Jack Miller. Just look how much those front forks are compressed there as he's braking. And then, yeah, that's a save and a half from Jack. Well done, Jack. Give yourself a pat on the back for that one. Just as he was on the power out of that first corner. If you stand on the grid here, stand on the start-finish straight, looking up to that first corner, you are staring at an elevation at the highest point of turn one of over 130 feet, over 40 metres. Davide Tardozzi, as Mark readies himself for the practice start session here, of course, immediately after FP1, as always. There's going to be so many relief faces across the whole of Ducati, and particularly those close to Mark after this big spill at turn 10. This is Fabio Quartararo getting that factory Yamaha a bit lively, to say the least, as he powers through the fourth gear 10.
Dancing the rear of his Aprilia through that particular corner. Joan Mir on board the Honda as Marc Marquez takes a look at how some of his rivals are doing it. None of them are having a particularly comfortable ride there, are they, through turn 10?
That's why it's called the horsepower rodeo, because you're hanging on for dear life. I've heard so many riders since we first came here, 13 years ago, they will tell you turn 10 just gives the impression like you're dropping off the end of the world. We saw so many riders have moments and get through unscathed. This big moment very early on in that opening session caught out Marc Marquez, but he did pick himself up and he did find a 202.093. It's going to be a little bit of pain and discomfort for the remainder of the weekend, I'm sure. But as we know, if anybody can block out the pain, the best painkiller as far as Marc Marquez is concerned is adrenaline. And he's so desperate, as we mentioned, to get himself back onto the top step of the podium here in Austin. One of his chief challengers could well be a rider who posed him a big headache in the sprint in the Grand Prix over in Brazil last weekend, Fabio Di Giannantonio. As mentioned, has that momentum from Brazil, and he's rolling with it so far here today in Austin.
Clearly looks very competitive, doesn't it, at the sharp end of the field. KTM, Ducati, Aprilia, the top three. Ducati, Aprilia, Ducati behind that. First Honda, Marini 7th from two more Aprilias, Agura and Bezzecchi, and Ducati completing the top 10. And as you can see there, those three manufacturers, Aprilia, Ducati, KTM, all with their strengths and weaknesses around this COTA circuit.
Marc Marquez fastest in the third sector, despite that massive crash he had at turn 10. Untouchable in the first half of this Austin lap, as you saw there from my graphic, was Pedro Acosta. He was clearly making the majority of his 201.715 through sectors 1 and 2. Just giving an indication there maybe of the steps and the strides forward he feels that KTM did make in the winter. A lot more sort of mid-corner turning, that rid themselves of some of that chronic understeer, which has been a real bugbear of Acosta over the last couple of years. They may not now have the fastest motorcycle or a clear advantage in terms of top speed, although the KTM does lead the way. In terms of top speed here this morning, Bastianini 342.4 kilometres, matched by the Ducatis of Di Giannantonio and Marc Marquez. And it just seems like the KTM stops better and it certainly turns better, in no part thanks to the great work of this man behind the scenes, Paul Espargaro, of course, KTM test rider, who does such a phenomenal job as the development rider on the RC16.
Which clearly, on balance, makes this KTM RC16 a better motorcycle all round than it was last year. It might not be as explosive in a straight line, but also by turning better, you also look after your tyres much better. And Pedro Acosta described that in Buriram when he held on quite nicely in that battle for second place late on in the Thai Grand Prix. Didn't have the plummet down the order on worn tyres that he had for a lot of last year.
Nothing wrong with the starting device on that KTM. We know it's one of the fastest starting motorcycles in Grand Prix right now, and Acosta made a perfect launch there. So we'll listen to Mark on the factory Ducati. Or not, as the case may be. We'll look at him drag away though up the hill into the first corner. Really good launch that away. The factory Ducati's getting hooked up nicely for both Mark and for Pecco Bagnaia. Engaging the start device, the whole shot device. Here's the World Championship leader Marco Bezzecchi. Dumps the clutch. Well, the initial launch was pretty neat and tidy, and just a bit of air time on the front wheel. I have to say the Aprilia start device in 2026 has been brilliant. I mean, Marco Bezzecchi was second on the grid. He was on the front row in Goiânia last weekend, but he completely out-dragged the Ducatis of Digia and Marquez off that front row of the grid, and that was it. He was gone.
Yeah, those Aprilias sit so low as they lead the line. It was something that really struck me when we were watching from the pit wall of the practice start sessions in the 2 pre-season tests, just how low that bike squats to the ground, and it's certainly helping them on the run to the first corner, because that was really where Marco Bezzecchi's Brazilian Grand Prix was won, by getting himself to the first corner first, getting the jump on pole sitter Fabio Di Giannantonio off the line, and once he did get that jump, they never saw him again.
Pretty clean getaway that, as far as Frankie Morbidelli is concerned. He's going to be looking desperate for a return to the top 3 soon. Almost a full calendar year since we've seen Frankie on a podium. Not in 18 since Qatar, and of course that was a bit of a gift when Maverick Vinales lost his top 3 with the tyre pressure penalty. So an eventful, far more eventful than he would have been hoping for, start to this Austin Grand Prix as far as Marc Marquez is concerned, but it started in painful fashion. It's at least ended with him showing that he's got the pace, he's got the speed, no question. A 2:02.093 ends Mark's session. Back on board with the fastest rider though in FP1 here in Austin.
Take 2 then for Pedro Acosta, who pulls onto the front row of the grid, which I think he's signed for right now. If he was offered a place in second place on the grid. Very little lift on the front tyre there, wasn't there, from the KTM. So Pedro Acosta will be pleased with his second attempt at getting his KTM off the line. And here Bastianini to the left, Marc Marquez in the centre, and Fabio Di Giannantonio not quite as close to Marc as he was at points in the Brazilian Grand Prix when they were literally leaning on each other through turn 6. But Marc Marquez now getting ready to drop the clutch again. Yeah, you feel one area that KTM surely have identified for Acosta to improve is his qualifying. You look, it's 43 MotoGP starts now. Only 5 of them he has fired away from the front row of the grid, which is an average. He's going to sort of have to ramp up if he's going to be a real serious title contender in 2026. Jorge Martin, head buried under the bubble of that factory Aprilia, chin on the tank, and that was a beaut. That was a beaut from Martin. Lovely work. Picked him up at the perfect time there on our camera on the outside of the grid. If he doesn't get back to winning ways this weekend, Lewis, you feel that when we get back to Europe, there's some real Jorge Martin strongholds coming up. I read in particular Le Mans as well.
Yeah, there are some real good circuits coming up for Jorge. He'd love to be back on the top step of the podium here this weekend. But I think at the moment he's just consolidating this brilliant start for 2026. I keep forgetting as well, of course, he missed 3 days of pre-season testing over in Sepang. He was underprepared compared to everybody else coming into the season. Just shows the great nick he's got himself into, and once again underlines the obvious, just how darn good the Aprilia is right now.
Yeah, he said after his podium finish last weekend, I always knew that once I was 100%, the speed has never gone anywhere. He's always had that speed that made him MotoGP World Champion back in 2024. So Aprilia, as mentioned earlier in the season, they're coming at Ducati from all angles. We've already seen Bezzecchi take 2 victories. Ralph Fernandez has been on a podium. Ayagura might have done the same had he not had some poor qualifying and poor starts. And of course, Jorge Martin second. So the Noali brand have got 4 genuine front-running contenders here.
Yeah, they've got 3 bikes in the top 5 once again at the end of play this morning. Good news as far as Trackhouse are concerned in front of what will be a rather big guest list for that American-based team here this weekend is Ralph Fernandez has been able to quickly put Goiânia behind him. Good job that by Fernandez. He was 5th quickest this morning. How did Maverick Vinales fare, given the fact there's some concerns over the condition of his left shoulder? Not bad, actually, as far as Top Gun is concerned. I guess it's going to be, in terms of endurance runs, distance runs, 10 laps is the sprint, 3 p.m. local time here in Austin tomorrow. 20 laps, double the distance as always, will be the main Grand Prix here on Sunday. But as openers go, given the fact that he's not at his physical best, not a bad effort that by Vinales, mid 202s and within a second of the fastest pace.
Yeah, and Tech 3, who we already heard from Nico Goyon, speaking of Jack earlier on in the session, I think they would have probably taken that given how their Brazilian weekend was looking for the most part. As Marc Marquez removes the gloves, not in the same circumstances that we saw him removing them earlier. Right glove off, the left glove potentially might be a little bit more of a painful experience for the 93, given the bandaging and strapping we already saw. Yeah, he's been a little bit careful there, trying to eke that left glove off. There you can see the strapping on that left hand, and I dare say he might have some further exploration and some extra checks done on that left hand in the 3 hours or so he's now got before he's back on track.
Fabio Quartararo was 900ths of a second away from being the slowest Yamaha rider in that opening session. Credit to Jack Miller at 202.631. Maybe Miller and Rins went out some fresher at the end of the session. Fabio Quartararo perhaps didn't. We'll find out in the lunch break what was the sort of tyre situation as far as the Yamahas were concerned. But it's Miller that finished there, lead rider in 12th. Alex Rins, who was down at the wrong end of the leaderboard for much of this session, got himself up from 22nd to 15th. That actually pushed Fermin Aldeguer down to last place. Of course, we saw Aldeguer in action in 2026 for the first time, last time out in Brazil. You always feel a track like Austin, Lewis, when you're fresh out of big surgery on a damaged left femur, all the change of direction you've got to make, all the hard braking zones. This was going to be a real big examination of where Aldeguer is at physically, and at the moment it's already been a tough experience.
Yeah, 1.6 seconds off the pace, and he's, I guess, an even bigger, more exaggerated example of what we were talking about a moment ago with Jorge Martin. Of course, he missed the Sepang test. Fermin Aldeguer missed all of pre-season testing, so not only is he trying to get himself back into physical condition to ride these bikes once again, but also hasn't got the time on the bike to really get the best out of it.
You can see there, looks like a little bit of gravel rash, maybe some cuts, a little bit of scrapes, maybe a bit of bleeding under that bandaging on Mark's left hand and left wrist. Well, we're in the live music capital of the world, and giving Daniele Romagnoli his crew chief there. A bit of karaoke here from Jorge Martin. On a serious note, he is feeding back some vital information back to the Nuali engineers. Another really positive start to a Grand Prix weekend as far as the Martinade is concerned, and certainly that's the case as far as Pedro Acosta goes as well, because he was fastest in FP1 here in Kota, a 201.715. The KTM star back on top.
Top three were all in the 201s this morning. Pedro Acosta, Fabio Di Gianantonio and Jorge Martin. KTM, Ducati and Aprilia. Marc Marquez did lift himself up to 4th after crashing. Ralph Fernandez and Alex Marquez completing the top 6. Luca Marini top Honda 7th from another pair of Aprilias, Ayagura and points leader Marco Bezzecchi. Morbidelli 10th ahead of Pecco Bagnaia, who did lead midway through the session before dropping to 11th. Miller 12th, top Yamaha. Vinales and Bastianini for Tech 3. KTM next up ahead of Rins, Binder, Mir. Fabio Quartararo 18th ahead of Toprak in 19th. Joan Zarco and Diogo Moreira for LCR under the radar in the 203s. 20th and 21st, just ahead of Fermin Aldeguer.
It feels like every session so far in 2026 has had some kind of big story, a big headline and some drama. Well, that one's certainly the case as well here in Austin, Texas, as the former king of Kota, Marc Marquez, had the big early crash at turn 10, eventually finishing 4th place. Pedro Acosta did go out on fresh rubber for that third, and as you can see, new soft front, new medium rear tyre, and that's what catapulted Acosta to his session topping 201.715.
Fabio Di Gianantonio also going for fresh rubber on his third run, medium front and rear, which got him into the 201s to take second.
Impressive once again by our 2024 world champion Jorge Martin. He was out on some worn rubber on that third run, wasn't he? Getting some good information there on the medium combo was Martin.
And not a lot to look at for Marc Marquez here for very obvious reasons. Run 1 ending with that crash at turn 10, but he did lift himself up into 4th by the end of run 2.
Sector 1, which includes that sharp, steep rise up into the first corner, was led by Pedro Acosta. Fabio Di Gianantonio second ahead of Alex Marquez.
Acosta also owning the second sector, which takes us partway through the back straight.
How does he do it despite the big get off at turn 3? In sector 3 it is Marc Marquez fastest ahead of Figia and Martin.
Of course, the fresh rubber also helping through those triple rights and the 2 lefts to end the act, with Ralph Fernandez quickest there.
Well, if he's going to reclaim the throne as the king of Kota, Marc Marquez is certainly going about it the hard way. This is how his round 3 in 2026 started, in pretty dramatic fashion. The super slow-mo not really doing justice to just how severe that crash was for Marc. 192 kilometres. We tracked him when he lost control of that factory Ducati. He picked himself up to finish 4th quickest, but your fastest rider on the opening session here in Austin. A perfect start to his Texan Grand Prix weekend. Pedro Acosta, quickest in FP1.